So if you do want to participate in the discussion, you're more than welcome to the numbers at the bottom of your screen. As you know, I'm a qualified life coach and NLP practitioner, and I deal with issues helping individuals overcome daily challenges. And I raise topics weekly with regards to what's happening in our community so that we can talk about it and, raise more awareness. Today, we're going to be talking about another topic regarding a discussion around parents encouraging and emphasizing Islamic education versus secular education. And with me today to help me in this discussion, I have a lovely guest, Brother Rauf. Shokoya. Salamu alaikum, brother. How are you?
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, sister. I'm fine, thank you. Alhamdulillah, and thank you for inviting us.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure to have you sitting here with me today. I know that you've gone on your own journey yourself from, many years ago with regards to learning and, teaching, yourself, obviously with help and whatever role models and mentors you did have. But the thing is, I find that even myself growing up in a Muslim family, I had to go and, go through this journey of learning about my religion, especially where I had to take it upon myself. My parents did their best, obviously, but there's always I think, a stage in your life where, especially when you come to teenage years, where you are thinking in more existential terms and you want to question more and you want more answers. And it is, regarding our environment, and especially growing up in the West, you kind of bombarded with, one side of a philosophy and science and education. And then there's also the Islamic teaching. So I didn't inherit my religion. I actually went and took it upon myself to research and even divert into a different direction to even my own family. But the thing is, I think nowadays we do have an issue which I am constantly being made aware of, where teenagers, children, or even adults have an issue where there is more emphasis on the secular education, and that is regarded as success and happiness, and this is what we need to work towards our future, which is not incorrect completely. It is there, but I feel that it is mainly concentrated on that level. I want to know and hear your thoughts. Obviously we can look at it from different perspectives, but I've just sort of started off saying that. So what are your thoughts when parents are emphasizing or encouraging their children with regards to Islamic education versus secular education?
Thank you very much, sister. I mean, there was a lot that we could, of course, dissect from your opening remarks, your introduction there, and inshallah, I'm sure before we conclude, we will try and maybe touch on some of those particular issues. I'd say first and foremost, yes, I would probably agree that a lot of us parents are maybe guilty of laying too much of an emphasis on secular education. Although I'm maybe slightly uncomfortable with using that particular phrase, in the sense that I understand that education in the West is more secular. I understand that the kind of transcendental and the spiritual dimension of a human being has been eroded and eradicated from the concept of a human being. We are more taught along humanist lines as opposed to religious lines. I understand that, but I'm also of the opinion that while we need to be very careful in understanding and dissecting the educational process that we're going through here in the West, we always have to, and it's difficult and it's a challenge which I'm sure we'll discuss as the program progresses, but we need to always remember or learn in the context of our faith and our principles and our tenets. If we have those in the backgrounds of our mind, although it will be difficult, as you yourself have mentioned about the challenges that you went through growing up, as did I, and I'm sure many of our viewers out there as well. If we have that basis and those principles almost like our guiding principles, then we hopefully will be able to navigate through a lot of what we're taught in schools in this particular country, so that we can hopefully gain what is beneficial to us and understand, analyze, evaluate what we've been taught, but not necessarily accept everything that is given to us.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think that it's a problem for us to emphasize the importance of a secular education, because at the end of the day, we're Muslims, we have to earn a living, and if we want to earn a halal living and inshallah a relatively prosperous living, the way to do it is through education. And of course, we have many ahadith in our literature which encourage us to learn the famous hadith, for example, learn from the cradle to the grave, or go and seek knowledge, even though it may be in China. Many people will put forward the first verse of the Holy Quran is Iqra, which is again an exhortation for us to learn. And I'm reminded of the Battle of Badr, if I'm not mistaken, when the Muslims won and were victorious, and they caught many of the prisoners. One of the ways these prisoners could negotiate their release was through teaching other Muslims how to read and write. So, yes, you're right, and inshallah, we'll try and dissect it in some more detail as the show progresses. But again, I would just wanted to just make it clear that although there is a clear difference between secular and Islamic education, I don't think that they're necessarily always mutually exclusive.
Thank you so much. That was a great opening yourself. And again, you've given me lots more information. I also want to welcome Syed Razavi. Thank you so much, Syed, for joining us. You're always there to give us your insights and, your amazing knowledge. Assalamu alaikum, Syed. Can you hear me?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for hosting.
You're welcome. As we were discussing secular education versus Islamic education, I just want to obviously make sure that I make it clear that we are here to say that education is definitely what we all aspire to achieve in every area, as our religion, our faith does state so. But my concern is in today's households that a lot of the families, especially, do influence their children growing up, and the influence they have is more towards the encouragement regarding the secular education, and the Islamic education is probably limited to just the Saturday or the Sunday couple of hours or few hours on the weekend, where they will attend an Arabic madrasa, learning a few things, which I personally think is very limiting to especially our faith, which we actually should be living our religion instead of just learning those few hours. So I just want to know from your perspective, Syed, as to how important is our Islamic education, which should be further than just those madrasas on the weekend.
Bismillah ar-Rahim. I actually feel the history of education in all divine faiths. The hub of education used to be the religious establishments, either in churches, synagogues, or mosques. And as long as this was the tradition, I think it produced a positive, what do you call it, positively educated scholars in the society. But when they started to separate secular education from spiritual education, we are witnessing there are a lot of problems all over the world, whether in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. In old Arabic world or Persia or Indian subcontinent, the mosques were the hubs of education, every kind of education, and the children used to be brought up in that environment. And similarly in the churches, that was the same. I mean, if you go to Oxford and Cambridge, majority of educational establishments actually started from the churches, and then really they separated the secular education from spiritual education. So to really look at, and we to introduce the combined education together. And Alhamdulillah, in Hussain, they have reintroduced this, and there are now scholars with on able to present formulas in chemistry and other sciences. I was told only a few years ago, Shahid Saduq University registered several thousand new formulas, and by the people with the turban on hand, who, while they were educating Islamic studies, they are all active in other fields. And Alhamdulillah, there are some Muslim educational establishments in UK who are following the same pattern, although mainly in the Sunni Muslim school of thought. And Alhamdulillah, school of thought, Islamic College started to follow that pattern, although it's not at large scale. So we need to keep, and there are narrations that there are two kinds of knowledge: mul abdan, mul adyan, the knowledge of bodies and knowledge of religion, or knowledge, and they have to work together. If the mind is not set and not confused, then will not be producing educated illiterates. At the moment, we have scientists and knowledgeable doctors, but they are educated illiterates. We don't want that. Educated illiterate is far more dangerous for the society than not having them.
Thank you so much. That's a lot of food for thought over there. Again, always some wise insights from our Syed, our resident scholar and imam. The thing is, what I want to just highlight though is that a lot of people feel that if they're going to Islamic schools or Islamic education, normally it's because they want to go into that path of either being a speaker or taking on some sort of like Islamic profession. Whereas my sort of thought is that that should just be something which is an addition, regardless of what profession or what sort of like, career path you're going into the future. Because I feel as if like just with personal development, Islamic education is continuous, ongoing. But I do still find, again, as I will, say it again, as I did at the beginning, that a lot of our parents especially are only and mainly, not all, but a lot of them are encouraging, their children to take on the secular education because that's seen as the way forward in life, the way to progress, the way to live, the way to be. And if we did what the Sayyid said, is to combine it or put a much more emphasis in it, then maybe we would be having different households, different communities and society today. At the same time, we have problems where even I deal with lots of professionals that come to a level where they have reached that sort of like I don't know whether they are really optimal in their sort of like educational background or their professional status, but again they're confused about decision making in life with regards to moving forward in their families or having relationships. And again, for me it's simple because we have the Islamic education, but it's lacking in our households today. And when there's even mental health issues, and when there's even misuse of addictions and other sort of things that are happening in our communities, it is all because of the lacking of the Islamic education. And I just want to say that we do have Islamic educators out there. But again, I think we're going to look deeper into the actual Islamic education that is actually being provided to our students as well. Are they, qualified teachers that are in the Arabic schools? Are they, giving them enough holistic learning other than just the Quran and jurisprudence, for example? And is there just more pressure on reciting the Quran in a particular way and gaining those prizes and standing out? Or is it really talking about real living, right living? What's your thoughts on that? Sorry, my questions are long, but I have a lot to say, which I just want to try and get in. You pick whatever you want and you can take it from there.
Okay. Is that directed to the Sayyid or myself?
Brother Rauf, please, your turn first.
Okay. Yes, alhamdulillah, thank you very much, sister. And again, of course, there are so many issues, and sadly, I'm sure the time will not permit us to deal with them all. You asked the Sayyid if Saturday and Sunday madrasa was sufficient. Of course, I don't think it necessarily is, but we live in a society where we're all very busy. Even our youngsters are busy. When I was my children's age, the amount of studying I was doing was a fraction of what they're doing today. So their lives are quite full anyway. But that, of course, is no excuse. I think to supplement Saturday or Sunday, and if you're lucky for your children to go to both, then both days, the weekend madrasa, as you mentioned, I think there's many ways that we can quite easily, if we're determined, supplement their education. For example, how religious are the households that our children are growing up in? If they're living in a household that is not that religious and they're just gaining some sort of understanding of Islam from what they see on a Saturday and Sunday, there's an issue. Alhamdulillah, we, especially us, the followers of Ahlebait, have the pulpit, and the pulpit for us is integral to us learning. Not that I want to reduce our learning to going to a majlis once a week. Many of us don't even do that. But if we can try to go once a week, alhamdulillah, there are lots of nuggets of knowledge that we can learn in terms of interaction with our children and how we engage with them. Even Salatul Jum'ah, as you know, and alhamdulillah, where I go, and I'm sure it's the case around the country, around the world, when it's summer holidays, particularly the summer holidays or any holiday for that matter, you see parents taking their children to Salatul Jum'ah. So this is another way in which we can incorporate more learning into the life of our children. And then alhamdulillah, although of course we are quite saddened, particularly when we think about all of those that we have lost during this particular pandemic that we're facing, but I think it's brought to light for many of us the online resources that are at our disposal. So while I think, yes, you're right, and again, if we get time, we can maybe discuss it. We need to maybe look at the curriculum and the syllabus that we are using in our madaris, in our madrasas, and see where it needs to be tailored and altered to accommodate for the life and the challenges that our youth are facing today. There are many ways in which we can at least help our children. And of course, it's about understanding our children. And as you said, you're a lifetime coach. I'm sure all of this stuff is not new to you. Whether we're Muslims or not, if we want to have a positive influence on our children, then we need to make sure that, unlike when I grew up and the relationship maybe that I had with my parents, the children of today, you can't just tell them to do X, Y, and Z and expect them to accept it. So are we as parents, particularly followers of the Ahlebait or Muslims in general, are we encouraging discussion with our children? Are we trying to hush our children up whenever they ask us something that's a bit too difficult or they're challenging our viewpoint? Are we open to discussion? Are we allowing them to question, to comment, to critique what we believe? We need to make sure that our children are opening up. And something else, which again, I'm sure many parents do anyway, but it's a good reminder, is not being afraid to say, I don't know. There are many times that my children will say to me, I don't know. And then the next response from me will be, well, let's Google it. Now, of course, that is not the panacea to all ills. But if you can maybe sit down with your children and Google and maybe teach them methods and techniques whereby they can Google and try and find valid information and not misleading information, then it's a way you're educating your children, but also educating yourself at the same time.
Thank you. That's very true. Again, I just want to sort of say that as much as children today are very busy, I do hear a lot of parents also emphasizing on the extracurricular activities, which most of the time does not include our Islamic teaching. And again, there is time. I really do believe there is time, and we need to obviously prioritize our time. The reason why I'm so strong on this point is because I deal with people with issues every day. They come with me where their children are not necessarily listening, or the parents are not necessarily having control, and they're not the drivers and they're not the influences and the leaders in their household. And as we know that there's a huge amount of Muslims incarcerated and in trouble, or having these issues. So I'm talking about a small percentage, but it is ever increasing, and we need to obviously extinguish that sort of fire that's out there, which is really problematic. The other thing is, Syed, I want to ask you with regards to our Islamic education, unless you're going into maybe a college or university, before that, obviously we have the weekend schools. I know there's a few centers, like I've been there myself lecturing, and they have amazing programs, which is holistic and is, addressing different issues. Like I've been, discussing in Haydari, and I've been in Stanmore, and they've got amazing programs for, children of all ages. They've even generally, even in the Shia community, we have summer camps and things like that, which they're inviting, speakers from around the world, which is amazing. But obviously, as a brother Rauf said, if you come from that sort of family who is taking that interest in your learning and Islamic education, then yes, it is definitely possible, because there are things out there. But unfortunately, not all parents are like that, even when the children are actually keen. However, there are some Arabic schools where I find that there aren't necessarily qualified teachers. And I've heard stories where some of, if they were even teaching children, it's actually having an adverse effect. And I've known parents from my generation not sending their children to Arabic school because of their own bad experience. So it's, even though I've tried to talk them out of it, because it's obviously, I still feel that it's really still, vital for them to have their children experience it differently. And we're a different time and it is different. But I still hear stories where maybe teachers, for example, I'll give you one where it was actually a student that came to me saying that, her teacher in Arabic school was saying, you can't have water. She's like, I just wanted some water. And, the teacher's like, well, just can't you remember Imam Hussain at the end of the day? He could do without water. And I'm like, what are you trying to represent? The oppressor or the oppressed? It's like sometimes our teachers are not necessarily teaching our children in the correct form. And I just feel like it's something small like that. It may be one occasion, but I hear many stories. And I think that this is a top school with a really learned teacher who is saying this to a young student asking for water and interpreting the story of Imam Hussain as if to say that she needs to actually hold herself back from drinking water. That's just one example. Now, are we actually teaching in the right way? Are we actually, what more can we do in our Islamic schools so that we actually are not, having an adverse effect on our students to continue their Islamic education? Syed.
Yeah, I mean, this shows that we need to concentrate a lot on teacher trainings. I've been to many countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Latin America, and other places, and I've seen they have started schools there, but in quite a lot of schools, the teachers who are teaching them are not educated enough. I mean, I'm sure non-religious subject can be taught by even a non-Muslim, but it would be better that if we educated our youngsters in this field. I mean, future generation, especially Muslims living in the non-Muslim society, should encourage the youngsters to get into the field of education and with the knowledge of Islam. So even if they are teaching a science subject, they have something about, they have background of Islamic knowledge. And this is one of the major problems in many Muslim countries. We are witnessing that Muslims brought up in a Muslim environment, Muslim country, and when they come out of that establishment, become anti-Islam, or they become atheists, and this and that. So the reason for that is the teachers are not educated and trained properly. So I would encourage all the Muslim centers throughout the non-Muslim to add a program for teacher training in the schools, and they should not this job of educating children, although mother is not enough. But even if you want to teach in a weekend madrasa, you have to have teacher training classes, and then you can take up that responsibility in the society.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. It's really important. I always wanted to tackle this topic, actually, because there's no point even saying that we are having the secular education there when we don't have anything to counter it. because our teachers in our Islamic schools cannot counter the philosophy or the science in an Islamic way in the Islamic madrasas. So that's what my point is, because at the end of the day, if we taught about philosophy of, some of the historians in our secular education, and also the story of evolution, for example, or other sort of like sciences or anything like that, are we actually countering it in our madrasas, or is just reading Quran and reading what is halal, what is haram, and this and that, and what is accepted and what is not? We need to be more holistic, and especially with mental health, and especially with encouraging children to want to continue their Islamic education. The teachings and the teachers themselves have to obviously improve even their way of teaching, because I find that sometimes they're either too harsh because they want to be too strict in order to get that sort of student to learn, or the opposite, where they're very, very easygoing, and also maybe the actual teacher or the head teacher are friends with the parents, so that the children know they're never going to get told off because it's a Saturday school, and because it's a Saturday, it's easygoing. And I get that too, but at the same time, I personally do give assembly on my local Arabic madrasas, and I teach them and I talk to them about how important it is for them to actually take on this education, even if they could be playing games on a Saturday. But I talk about the mind, and I talk about the exercising the brain and how much they can gain and also balance their life, and how important that Islamic education is, which is not being actually spoken about in most Islamic centers. And yes, the curriculum does need to be revised, especially where there's a collection of people not just showing Islamic books and education, but talking about other areas in the Islamic schools where students can come to speak to their Islamic teachers and turn to them and have them as influencers. Do you have any experience, Brother Rauf, of any sort of like yourself either being a student, learning? I don't know, maybe you were much older, or even your young children, or just stories generally about, do your kids really love going to Arabic school to learn, or is it the opposite?
Yeah, I think, like you said, in my case, I came to Islam in my early 20s. So, of course,
We
for
can't
me
hear.
to come to the decision to revert to Islam, of course, there's a lot of research that needs to go into it, critically analyzing one's life and the morals that one holds to, if indeed, one is actually got any set of or any sort
I
of
can't hear
morality
the
as
brother.
such.
Sorry,
Um,
Brother Rauf, is your volume on? Because it's a bit low. The Syed cannot hear you.
oh, okay. Sorry. I think just bear me a second. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but it's slightly low volume.
Okay, say it now. Can you hear me?
Very low.
It's very low.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This
Oh,
better.
now
Apologies.
it's
Let me
better.
just see if I can
No,
Yeah,
it's
now
fine
it's
now.
put the
better.
volume on.
It's
Okay,
fine now.
brilliant.
I think
So
you
what
must
I was saying was, of course,
have.
when it comes to me and my journey to Islam, because I was an adult at the time, I guess the thought processes that somebody of my age would go through would be different to children. Um, I think, and of course, it's a discussion that I continually have with my children. I think, in fact, I'm fairly sure that they actually enjoy madrasa, and I know for a fact that they've missed it over the last 4 months or so. Um, that may have something to do with the type of madrasa that they go to. The madrasa that they go to, I think, is quite developed or progressive, should we say. Of course, there's always room for improvement. I think, like you said as well, maybe when it comes to our teaching staff in Saturday and Sunday madrasas, or even weekday madrasas, I think if we were to look more long term in terms of maybe, like you said, educating them, or aiding them in them educating our children, maybe look at a more structured pay for them as well, because as you know, many of them are volunteers, and many of these volunteers are some of the best teachers, no doubt, because they're doing it from the heart. But I think that's maybe something that we need to look at in the future, something that myself and Syed have spoken about in the past, even when it comes to our speakers on the pulpit. Many people do it out of love, which is good. And inshallah, they are, paid for it, but there needs to be a more kind of structure in place, especially because we need more English speakers here in the West. But going back to your question, when I think about my children's madrasa, there are many things that impress me, because I think a lot of the lessons are not just, fiqh, jurisprudential lessons. and then lessons on how to pray salah, how to do wudu. There are lessons, particularly when we talk about history or even the Quranic studies. It's about lessons in the Quran, but it's about the lessons that can be learned therein, and it's about highlighting the morality within the Quran and the morality, ethics, and so on and so forth. So it's not a kind of one-dimensional system that is taught there. But of course, I think we need to maybe start looking more into how we equip our youngsters for a pluralistic society in which they live. And as you had mentioned at the beginning, you're going to be, or they are going to be bombarded with a lot of messages coming from different angles. And,
Yeah.
you know, these madrasas, I believe, need to start helping us equip our children to deal with those particular messages and help them, you know, cipher through the wheat from the chaff, as it were. And of course, one particular issue that no doubt is very pertinent or will be over the course of the next few years is the PSHE education, you know, this personal, social, health and economic, which doesn't really it's not really a true explanation of what you know, education in the UK particularly is going to be looking like in this particular subject. So, you know, these I think are more pertinent issues. I understand what you're saying about Arabic teachers, and I understand what you're saying about the kind of one-dimensional approach, and I think I agree with you wholeheartedly that going forward, the challenges are going to become even more intense. And I think while there are many syllabuses out there that are quite progressive, we need them to continue to develop society.
Thank you so much. I would love to have listened to you even more, as especially Syed as well. But unfortunately, we have come towards the end of the show so quickly. But we have raised many points, and I just want to thank you all for being here today. Syed, Rizvi, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, and Brother Rauf. Inshallah, we have hopefully you know, given you some food for thought. And yes, there are some amazing Arabic schools, madrasas out there that are teaching wonderfully with some amazing teachers who are actually also volunteering. I'm only raising the small amount of percentage of people that are actually having some sort of adverse effect. But inshallah, we can only improve. And hopefully with the Syed and